What was it that attracted you to the sniper role?
Honestly, because we had a sniper team attached to us during the invasion, and just how professional those guys were.
Mm.
Um, like it's part of the main thing. I just wanted to try something new, and the feeling of probably we're probably going to go back. I wanted to be with a group of guys that I guess took the job a little bit more seriously. Not to say these other guys didn't, but to guys who knew who wanted to better themselves. And then if you get in a firefight, you're gonna have a group of professionals with you. And so for me, I was a what's called a pig. There's two types of snipers. There's a pig and a hog. So for me, I was a pig, a professionally instructed gunman, and the hogs are the school trained guys, called hunter of gunmen. So I initially tried out for the platoon, passed the indoctrination. Uh, they don't, I don't want to say haze, but they train you hard and basically teach you everything you need to know before going off to the school in Pendleton.
Right, and very physically demanding, and not many made it through the school, right?
Right, and even the indoc. When I took the initial indoc, I think by the end of the first 2 months, 3 months, maybe max, I was the only guy left.
Wow.
Yeah, because it was just constant, like, okay, let's go for a mile run. Okay, then we're gonna go sit in class for an hour, and then in the middle of the class, they'll lay out like 10 items. Like, okay, look at these 10 items, yelling at you, whatever, trying to distract you, and then they'll have you run off again. And then in the middle of the run, they'll be like, okay, now recall these 10 items, size, shape, color, everything, just to kind of work on our observation skills and our ability to recall certain things.
And you do, I mean, you are a sniper when you go back. Was all that training as as you actually then were a sniper in the battle for Fallujah, all that training came in handy, I'm assuming.
Oh, definitely, yes,
Yeah.
without a doubt.
What is the best thing and the hardest thing about being a sniper?
I guess the best thing, like I kind of mentioned earlier, was just being with a group of professionals that took the job serious. If we get ambushed or something happens, you can rely on these guys to perform. I think the worst thing is probably taking someone's life within, I guess that uh, such a close range. I guess you can say because given the scope, you're observing the person as a whole when you take their life, and that's probably just the toughest thing.
And this is something, even as you say it, you can bring images to your mind.
Right? Yeah. Oh yeah.
So this might come across as a really stupid question. But I've talked to a lot of combat vets, guys in Vietnam who say, most of the time you didn't, the only time you saw the enemy was after a firefight, and you'd see the dead enemy once you went and looked and, got the body count. You're not shooting at people, you're shooting at gun flashes. And
Right.
so here I am with my M16 or my 50 or my M60 or whatever, and I don't know whether I hit anybody or not. And so they go through life not knowing, you know. Now in your case, there's no ambiguity at all, right?
No, every time I've had to pull the trigger, it was just I knew exactly. I always saw them every time.
So the question, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't really know how to formulate the question, but because I can't think of it like a serious way to formulate the question. The question just, I think, is just going to sound stupid. But if given the choice, would you prefer to keep the definite knowledge that you have, or would you prefer to be in the position of those other vets who say, well, I pulled the trigger and shot at those tracers coming at me, but I don't really know what happened.
I would keep my experience, I think, because it was a conscious decision each time with the idea of like, hey, am I saving Marine lives? Am I saving civilian lives? Does this help with the objective? To where these guys are kind of, and it's no derogatory thing to them. They're kind of spraying and praying. They don't know what if they're hitting enemy and maybe sometimes maybe even civilians. I don't know, depending on the situation, the environment. But I think I'd rather keep my experience and just know why I did what I did.
Do you think it's correct? And I want to ask you about how how things actually operated. Um, but before I do that, do do you think it's correct to think of your role as a sniper and the other Marine snipers as kind of guardian angels? You've got these Marines down here in the streets going door to door, they're patrolling. You're up here and you're kind of looking out for them, right? You're looking a
Right.
block ahead, right?
Right, yeah, we're always taught, it's called Overwatch. Basically, if there's like a patrol and we're in the area and we're attached to like a company or a platoon, we would provide Overwatch as they move through a certain area. And even in Fallujah, when they were taking sniper fire, when we first got to the first day of the battle, as soon as they started taking sniper fire, like, hey, where's the sniper team attached to us, and I had to go to their CP where they're taking fire, and it was expected, like, hey, do something about this. You know what I mean? So everyone's kind of looking at me like, hey, you can take the sniper out as they're taking fire. So
Yeah, so I mean, really, I mean, you're looking for the enemy, but the objective here is really you're looking out for those other Marines
right,
who can't see what you can see.
correct, yeah, because we have the observation, we have the optics, spotting scopes, binoculars, the rifle scope, things like that. And I remember one of the snipers, he was an honor graduate from sniper school when I got to the platoon in 2003. And I remember him specifically saying, he's like, hey, it's not our job to take lives, it's our job to save lives. I'm like, so that just kind of stuck with me. So I just kind of kept that in the back of my head.
Sure. So, so walk me through it. You guys are planning, so we've got a plan. We're going to go into this part of Fallujah. So how does it work? I mean, do you guys go in first, get positioned, and then those guys come in? What's just how does that operation unfold?
So for Fallujah, I mean, the plan was just basically support the rifle company that you're attached to, as needed. We'd have a security element with us, two Marine infantry guys that would essentially watch our backs, as our job was to look for Overwatch positions over the line company. And that was pretty much it. It was pretty simple, straightforward. Like, hey, if we're taking fire, I'm gonna specifically talk to the lieutenant. He's like, hey, just take out as many as you can. Just help us out in that regard. And yeah, basically maintain the high position and take out any threats.
So is it something like, okay, the officer says, all right, these Marines, they're going to head down the street and, something like in 5 minutes, we're going to start heading down this street. In those 5 minutes, you guys get up in that building. So you've got Overwatch of us as we're moving down that street. They would get down, then you'd come down and then jump up again someplace further down. Is that kind of how it went? Kind of a hop?
Sometimes, right, that'd be like a bounty in Overwatch. But specifically in Fallujah, it was just, I mean, it was pretty chaotic. Like everyone just got online, rushed into the city, like full front assault, and basically like, hey, find a good position that you can support us as everything's going on. But it was more in the third deployment to where, yeah, we'd be like, hey, or we're going to support you guys during this patrol. This is the outline of the patrol. This is the area of the neighborhood we're going to watch. If you guys can sit in this high position and provide Overwatch, that'd be beneficial to them. But a lot of the times too, it was more, we're getting hit with IEDs on this road. We need you to watch this road for anyone placing IEDs, and you're going to be here for 2 days. And a lot of times, it's just sitting there watching some random road in the middle of nowhere that had been recently placed with IEDs, and just watching it with just me and one other person. That
Yeah.
was probably most of the missions we did.
I mean, so one of the interesting things is your training is very physical. It's very mental too, the way you describe it. It's very mental, um, emphasizing memory and details,
Right.
but very, very physical. Um, but then, as you describe it, the sniper work, yeah, a lot of it is you're just you're there in one spot for
Yeah.
hours or
Very boring.
yeah, I mean just very what's the right word? I mean you're just there on scene. Um so I mean what kind of I guess I'm wondering about sort of the personal traits that it takes to be an effective sniper. So just as an example, I mean, some kid says he wants to be a Navy SEAL, but then you find out he's afraid of heights, so well, that's probably not going to work out, because if you're just on the roof of a house and you're scared to death, you're probably not going to succeed as a SEAL. So, so one trait that it's going to take to be a successful SEAL is not being afraid of heights in that way. What are some of the traits that, make for an effective sniper?
I would think probably more so for me, it was, I think, perseverance, not quitting. Um,
Because you're there for a
yes,
long time, just waiting to see something.
right.
Yeah.
So patience is a big one. And that's probably the main one, probably patience and your ability to recall information. Because I remember that's the one thing they kept testing us on. Like, hey, can you remember this definition for whatever thing it was verbatim? Can you recall which items you just observed? Can you sit in this spot for 2 days without, shifting and moving and drawing attention to yourself? So I'll probably say perseverance and patience.
Would it also require the ability to put things away? So here's what I mean. Um, you've got a target, target's out, but we can't spend a lot of time dwelling on that. We just got to put that away because there might be another target, in an hour. Is that something too, just the ability just to put it away and to move forward?
Yeah, I would think so because when we got ambushed on the third tour, which was insane because we thought we are all gonna die, just based on how outnumbered we were. It was kind of like, okay, well, you guys get the weekend off, and then after the weekend, you guys are going back out and do observation posts. So yeah, the ability to kind of just stuff it away and just kind of not dwell on it is a good trait to have. Just move past it, like, hey, we survived it, we got through it. Just move on.
In your work as a sniper, did you ever find yourself in kind of a hunt, counter hunt with an enemy sniper?
I did in the first Battle of Fallujah, the first day, when Kilo Company was taking fire. Um, they're like, hey, we're at the CP, we're taking fire, and we need you guys to come here and help us find this guy. I'm like, okay, I'll do my best. It's an urban environment. There's a lot of places this guy could be hiding. So I remember getting to the CP and getting to the rooftop, and the sniper was still shooting at us through like the windows, through the door. I'm kind of like, shit, this is for real. Like this is like the first invasion where these guys were kind of like a pushover. You kind of had the sense that there's a stiffer fight, in hand. So me and my partner, we get up on the rooftop trying to find this guy. It's basically a ledge that leads up higher from the roof that they were already on. And I remember a machine gunner below me was like, "Hey, the snipers, I think he's shooting at you." And I didn't really have much respect for the enemy combatants really still at that time. I was like, he's like anyways, because his round was so off. I was like, anyway, let me try to find this guy. And then sure enough, within maybe 15 seconds after that, a round hit right in front of my face on the ledge. And if it wasn't for that ledge, it would have been right in my head. And as soon as I put my head down after, I could hear the rounds cracking by my ear, and it felt like they're very close because I was scared. So I was like, hey, told my partner, I was like, we have to get off this roof, which kind of went against our training. We're trained to go in a room and kind of sit back, but I guess due to the nature of the battle at the time, it's just kind of like hurry up, get here. So after getting off that roof, we just started shooting out windows to where people were like, hey, they're shooting out of this window. So we're just shooting out the windows, and then we tell the forward air controller, like, hey, we think he's in this building. And we're telling the armored tracks down there too, like, hey, shoot your grenades into this window. Um, I remember the forward air controller being pretty stressed out. He was pissed off that we're taking fire like that. Um, but the guy he was with ended up shooting a smoke round into the building, and at which point signaled for a Cobra helicopter to come in from behind it and launch rockets into the building. So
And
that was
did
probably the only time to where I was kind of like in that counter sniper phase.
yeah.
And it was pretty crazy.
And did the enemy sniper stop after the Cobra?
Yeah, he stopped. He stopped probably after we started shooting out the windows, but we just wanted to make sure. I don't know if he broke and ran, but I mean, the fire stopped.
Yeah. Normally when I talk to combat vets and a firefight has started, or they're a Cobra pilot in Vietnam or something and they're heading into a target, I've learned by now that, if you ask the question, what was going through your mind, that question's not really going to get you anywhere, because what you're going to hear is you're not thinking anything. Your training kicks in, the adrenaline kicks in, and there aren't there's not like linear thinking going on. You're just responding to events, you're responding to training. But I wonder if it's a little bit different in your case. And in your memoir, you describe, there are several instances you describe where you've got somebody in your sights. You've got either someone you know who is an insurgent or someone whom you suspect is an insurgent. So, and I'm not going to read this whole passage, but just a couple sentences or a few sentences. Here's what you write. As the Iraqi male reappeared, he squatted behind the nearby bush, facing our lines with his binoculars yet again. So that's obviously suspicious.
Mhm.
I then placed my crosshairs over his chest, just below his neck. I had my sights trained on him for approximately 5 seconds before I pulled the trigger. And what I'm interested in is, and this is not meant to pry, just to try to understand the world of war from the perspective of a sniper. Those 5 seconds, or there are other cases where you've got somebody in your crosshairs, but you're actually having to decide. I think in this case it's pretty clear.
Right.
This is a clear case, but there are other cases where it's less clear, and you actually have to decide, and it is your call. And it's quiet, or maybe it's not quiet. I don't know what's going on, but it's, at that moment, it's, it's your thoughts and your finger on the trigger, and you're making the decision. What kinds of questions are going through your mind as you're making this decision?
Just basically if that person's a threat, what does their intent seem to be? Like with someone with the binoculars, I'm thinking, okay, they're scouting our position. The night before that, our left flank was ambushed by a squad of insurgents that night. So we're thinking, this whoever's on these binoculars, they're reporting our positions back. They're probably adjusting indirect fire like mortars. We've been taking sniper fire all day. They're probably reporting our positions to the snipers, that they have. As compared to someone who's simply peering over like a wall, who's like maybe trying to gain their surroundings, like, hey, what the hell's going on? There's a war going on, there's gunfire going on. If they pose any real threat, if what they're doing is going to risk lives to other people, that's basically the main thing. I don't think anyone would have questioned me had I made that decision. But something I have to live with, and I have to make sure, hey, if kind of live with myself after that, basically. Are they a threat?
Sure. Now, in some cases, it's really clear, right? And then in other cases, it's a judgment call. Would you be, and then, I mean, I'm sure there are other cases where you've got your sights on somebody and you just conclude, I'm not going to pull the trigger on this one.
Right.
So I wonder if, I mean, maybe if we could just, if you could just sort of give us an example, what would be an example of a case that was just completely clear? This guy is obviously enemy. I've got him, going to do what we're going to do.
Also, the fact that they're armed. That's the most clear cut case, and they're wearing, the typical, I don't want to say black pajamas, but like all black head wraps, which was typically always worn by the fighters in Fallujah. That was the simplest way to identify them. So
Sure.
obviously, if they're armed with an AK and they're because everyone that we had interaction with in the city that were civilians that weren't combatants, they would basically do their best to vacate the area and leave. And then after that, it kind of turned into where you kind of knew who the fighters were that stayed.
And then I think that, I could, I think the answer to this one's going to be pretty clear, but what about, in your own case, an example you can remember from your own experience where you do have someone in your sights, but you conclude pretty quickly, no, I'm not going to, this one, this one's a no.
So I think the second it was the second day of the Battle of Fallujah where directly in front of our lines, there's this building and a Iraqi male pops his head up over the roof and he's just kind of looking around. I'm like, okay, this guy's wearing no shirt, looks like a dad who works at a mechanic shop or something like that. And no weapon, no binoculars, no tools that can be used against us. And I guess he's saying in the battle. Um, to me, that's pretty clear cut. Are people that were just simply coming out from their houses trying to get out of the area. Those were simple, clear cut cases where I'm like, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
So
How about, did you have a case where it's a 50-50, 60-40, and you're really just kind of, you're just going through this process of ranking a true decision?
probably when there's an insurgent scout that was running with his weapon across an open field. He wasn't surrendering. He wasn't doing anything that would indicate to us that he was trying to get out of the area. Like I said, the night before we just had been ambushed on the left on our left flank, which is where he was headed. So I don't know if he was getting ready to reinforce that. I mean, it crossed my mind like, okay, should I do it? Should I do it? But it was a split-second decision. If he gets past this line of sight and he's able to regroup with a bunch of guys, can it be deadly for the Marines to our left flank? So in that time, I was like, you know what? He's got a weapon. He's running. He's dressed in the traditional garb. I had, took his life.
Combat vets often there are, things that kind of a tape in their mind that they'll play over and over and over and over again. And there's a, you know, just wondering about, you know, I should have done this and I should have done that. Is that the case for you, or are there tapes, one or two tapes that you find yourself kind of rolling over and over again in your mind?
Probably with that scout when I shot him. He initially didn't pass, I should say. The thing was that a lot of these insurgent fighters were taking adrenaline to when they fought against us. So a lot of the times they would just keep going after they get hit. And I'm just thinking, okay, this guy just shot, he's wounded. Do I get to him? And I'm like, okay, well, if I get out there, I'm gonna get shot by a sniper. I'm gonna get ambushed by another group. So it was essentially of doing, do we put him out of his misery or what do we do? And the hard choice had to be made. I mean, there was no, regardless, upon receiving that type of wound, there was no way that that person would have made it. So it's more of like a mercy thing. That's probably the worst thing that I have to live through with my mind, and something I think about pretty often. But I mean, I felt like what I did was, right at the time.
On the other side, can you bring to your memory um, other Marines telling you after an operation that had you not been there, then things could have been a lot worse for them?
And this was a complete surprise to me. I ended up receiving an award with my actions against the enemy sniper. So I guess someone was talking about it. I just had no idea that that was even something that was brought up to higher command after the battle.